problem. Now, that's how that works. Thank you very much indeed. And welcome, everyone. My name is Darren Sanders. I'm a councillor for Baffins, North Milton and South Cotner. I'm also the Liberal Democrat Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness. Now, we have an agenda, but before then I'm under orders to tell you about the housekeeping and fire safety and all that stuff. So, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not use the lifts. Please assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations of the Guildhall Trust, whose building we are using today, anyone who signed in at the reception desk on the ground floor, please sign out when you leave. There is web streaming, so for the massed hordes, and I see sometimes the views of meetings of the council get up to 200, which is highly, highly impressive, I have to say. Thank you very much for logging on. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this is being live streamed, and everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, which means those poor people currently see me. That also means anybody making deputations. Alison, I don't think we've got any deputations today. No, we haven't. Lovely. Members of the press and public. So we don't have any members of the press, but I'm sure they're logging on online. And also the public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they've finished. I'm happy to help with assisting for normal humans, unlike the councillors who should know how to do this, with regards to the logging on and the logging off. So my role is now to make introductions. So I've done it. So I will start with young Alison over there.
Alison Harper from Democratic Services.
And then I will go from the back, because the heckler's row has...
Adam Hardwick, Assistant Director Buildings.
Then forward to the man in the blue suit.
Good afternoon, James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Alan Denford, Finance Manager for the Directorate.
Sally Scattergood, Assistant Director of Housing.
Mark Fitch, Head of Local Authority Housing.
Mary Bailey, tenant of Portsea.
Spencer Gardner, Member for Drayton and Farlington.
Raymond Dent, Councillor for Cotton Ward.
And last but not least.
Mary Valley, Councillor for Casham and Wimmering.
Okay, that's fine. Right, so we have no deputation requests. Nobody's apologised for their absence, I think. That's right, isn't it? Nobody's apologised for their absence. Lovely. Now, do any of the councillors here have anything interesting to declare that's relevant to the meeting? No. Lovely. Okay, so we go on to item 3, which is the council housing budget and rent setting, ye gods. So who's going to start this? Is it you, Alan, as you deal with the money?
It is. Thank you, Councillor Sanders. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm presenting the Housing Revenue Account Budget Report for the 2025-26 financial year. The report deals with revenue expenditure and income relating to council housing provision by Portsmouth Homes. A separate report will be brought to this meeting in March to allocate funding for capital projects next year. The decisions that are sought in this report are delegated to the Cabinet Member by full Council. They include setting the rents, service charges and other charges, taking into account the views of residents. This year's rent consultation started with a line-by-line review of the current budget in September 2024. This information was summarised in the Winter House Tour magazine. There were further meetings with residents in December and a letter to all residents setting out the draft proposals and asking for comments by the 31st of December. The initial comments received were reported back to the Resident Consortium on the 9th of January and at an online meeting that evening where further feedback was recorded. All of the responses are set out in Appendix 11 of the report. And I'll pass to Sally later to summarise the comments after I've outlined the report recommendations. So for absolute clarity, it is worth emphasising that today's recommendations are the same as the proposals that we consulted on. Recommendation 1 notes the forecast outturn for the 2024-25 financial year There's a deficit of 205,000, which is an improved position compared to the original budgeted deficit of £446,000. Recommendations 2 and 3 deal with the rent setting. It is proposed to increase rents by 2.7% from the 31st of March 2025, this being the nearest Monday to the start of the financial year. This is the maximum increase allowed under the government's rent standard and is based on the September Consumer Price Index plus 1%. The increase would see average rents rise by £2.90 per week. However, paragraph 3.2.5 states that rents will be limited to the published local housing allowance or LHA rate. This means that if residents are already in receipt of housing-related benefits and their circumstances don't change, any increase will be covered by their benefits. It is worth noting that the latest modelling indicates that a 5% rent increase would have been needed to cover the forecast costs for next year. If a 2.7% rent increase is approved today, the resulting budget deficit in 2025-26 of £1.99 million will be funded from a draw on reserves. Recommendations 4 to 7 seek approval for variations in the general service charge and the sheltered housing service charge. They also consider the level of laundry and heating charges. These proposals continue the policy of full cost recovery from the users of the service. The general service charge proposals are in Appendix 5 of the report. The proposal for the lower rate for houses and bungalows is a reduction of 14 pence per week. This recognises an appropriate level of general fund contribution to cover the use of the plain youth service by non-tenants. The proposal for the higher rate for flats and masonettes is an increase of 7.5% or £1.47 per week. This charge includes cleaning and grounds maintenance, and paragraph 4.1.3 of the report reports that the employment cost of a green and clean operative, including employer national insurance contributions, will rise by up to 9% next year. The proposed sheltered housing charges are detailed in Appendix 6. The charges and the respective increases are dependent on the level of service. As with the general service charge, the proposed increases are based on full cost recovery. Category 1 increases by 6% or £1.16 per week. Category 2 increases by 5.6% or £3.52 per week. And Category 2.5 increases by 8.5% or £9.57 per week. The report illustrates an increase in anticipated total employment costs for a sheltered housing support assistant of 8.5%, consistent with the Category 2.5 increase. The proposed laundry charges are in Appendix 7 and are unchanged for a second year running as energy costs have stabilised. Moving to the proposed heating charges for the 15 blocks that receive landlord heating, which are detailed in Appendix 8. The Council's Building Services team continue to undertake work to both reduce energy consumption and negotiate the best tariffs with our energy providers. As a result, a reduction in charges is proposed for all three forms of energy. A price reduction of 5.4% for electricity in Edgbaston House and Tipton House, a reduction of 2.9% for district heating in the Dickens blocks, and a reduction of 2.8% for gas heating in the sheltered blocks. Proposals for garage and parking site rents are set out in Appendix 9. An increase of 1.7% in line with the September 2024 Consumer Price Index is proposed for all sites in Recommendation 8. The policy of charging more for non-locals is retained. Recommendations 9 and 10 seek approval for next year's revenue budget and give authority for managers to incur expenditure. The final recommendation notes that the forecast revenue budgets up to 2028-29 are set out in Appendix 3. The table in paragraph 6.1 illustrates a forecast 5-year draw on reserves of circa £8 million, which is unsustainable in the longer term. And officers are committed to continuing their deficit reduction programme as described in paragraph 4.1.4, including looking for opportunities to reduce costs through efficiencies and the maximisation of income. I will now pass to Sally to present the programme for change in section 6.3 of the report and to outline the consultation responses.
So 6.3 on the report introduces the subject of a programme of change. As the report says, a local authority housing services, or Portsmouth Homes, as we're now identifying ourselves as, are facing a significant level of change arising from a combination of factors. And these factors range from, there are a number of areas really. So the key thing is, as a landlord, just like all other social landlords across the city, we are facing increased regulation from the Social Housing Regulation Act and the Building Safety Act. And these acts increase the number of expectations on us as a landlord in terms of things that we need to deliver, and also the way that we need to deliver our services. As part of compliance with that increased regulation, we have self-assessed ourselves as a landlord against those new expectations and have already identified areas where we want to improve in order to be more compliant with the new consumer standards. So that does involve changing some of the way that we do things currently. Alongside that, since COVID, we all recognise that during COVID we all changed our behaviours about how we interact with the different services that we use, and that was definitely the case for our tenants. However, we wanted to see if that behaviour change remained post-COVID, so we've allowed it to sort of settle down a bit. And then over the last year, we've gone back and sort of analysed the demand that we're seeing in terms of the way that our customers are interacting with us, how they're visiting the offices, are they visiting the offices, are they doing more online, what sort of services do they want to see, how do they want to receive those services. So we've used data to do that piece of work. We've also done some engagement with our residents and asked them those questions, and we'll probably be doing a bit more of that as well. And then alongside that, we've gone out and spoken to our staff and asked them what do they see in terms of the work that we need to do to improve? What are the barriers that get in their way? And I think most significantly, because of the additional expectations put on us by the Building Safety Act, we do need to be able to spend more in terms of capital into our properties to do that real investment work to meet the increased regulation there, but also just to improve the standard of those homes and keep them as we would want them to be, and safe and a pleasant environment for our tenants to be living in. So that does mean that we need to ensure that we're rebalancing where we're spending our money and pushing more into capital spend and less onto revenue, as we do. At the moment, we're spending more on revenue costs. So all of this is telling us that we need to have a look at how we deliver services and where we deliver them. And so we will be introducing the programme of change in a paper in April that will give you more information about that. But we'll be looking really at how are we going to deliver our services? What does that look like? What do tenants want to see from us in terms of services? How do they want to access those services? And also a new IT system potentially that will support us in being more efficient, more cost effective, and allow our residents to have more input into the way that their tenancy is run, so they'll be able to self-serve and see more information themselves without needing to go through the area office or a housing office to get that information. Portfolio members, residents, consortiums and stakeholders have already been engaged on the proposal to repurpose Weecock Farm. So this is probably the first part of our change programme. We very carefully looked at the demand going into the area office at Weecock Farm and could see that there was very little footfall going into that area office, and most of our tenants in Weecock were choosing to engage with us on the phone or via email or by us actually going out and doing a visit. There was very little in terms of them going into the area office. We also want to encourage our teams to work more as part of the community, to be more joined up in the way that we deliver services, so that we're working with partners in the community. And with that in mind, we identified that right next to Wecock Housing Office there is a community centre. It's literally a few yards away. So we've completed a consultation with our staff and with our residents, and as a result of that, from the end of the month, so from the end of January, we will be introducing the new model of service delivery for Wecock, in that services will be based in the community centre twice a week, so there'll be surgeries there twice a week, and the officers will be working out of Lee Park office managed by Lee Park, which also centralises the services for Havant Borough Council in one place, rather than having to deal with two separate managers. We identified as part of the work to do that, there were only a very small number of residents who actually go into the office to pay by cash. We're contacting each one of those residents individually. I think we've got it down to around 11 now who actually pay rent physically in the office every week or month. And we are offering alternative methods of payment. So there are 2 post offices in close vicinity to there, so they will be able to pay their rent in the post offices. So that is the change programme, and as I say, there will be more on that as we get more detail, and we'll bring that back to you. If I can go back to the consultation results then. So we had 39 overall responses from the consultation. Of these, 12 responses proposed a lower rent increase, while 11 responses thought the increase was fair or should be higher. For service charges, 15 residents specifically argued for a lower charge, while 4 thought the increase was fair. Where other issues were raised, which were specific to individual tenants, these have been passed to the appropriate housing officer or estates team. So we've got contact details for all those that provided feedback. If it's an issue, there were kind of 2 common themes. One was either affordability or the services they were receiving, particularly around estate services. So we will be contacting each one of those individually to address whatever their individual concerns are, whether it's around affordability or the services they're getting in their particular buildings. That is it, I think.
Is that it? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for that. Now, I hope colleagues don't mind, but I want to do the next bit slightly differently to how I do it normally. I will first ask our Residents' Consortium and political colleagues for their questions on the budget, and then I will have a couple as well. But separately, I'm interested to get not just comments on the budget itself, but also comments on the general service, based on your observations, what you see, what people tell you. And that's because this is a turning point, really, for the service as a whole, because the next year may well see a lot of change that impacts on this service. We may be forced into a merger or shotgun wedding, according to your taste, with other councils that don't work as we do. There's a new Decent Home Standard, and as Sally has said, a new Building Safety Act to deal with. Next month, I know we'll be getting an update on our self-referral to the regulator. So some general thoughts now from colleagues, and please be open, including it's all rubbish, can help us go forwards, and we can work together on that, and I will offer mine on the end. So the fairest way of doing this is to do it by council group size, which means we start with Spencer and our Conservative colleagues. Spencer.
Thanks for pointing that out, Chair.
Any time. You benefit from it later, don't worry.
For now, at least.
Thank you,
no questions, because actually my question has helpfully been answered, so I'm grateful for that. So I was interested to hear whether any action was going to be taken in response to the consultation responses, which were obviously valid and understandable consultation responses, but also partly complaints. I'm really pleased to hear that the team's been proactive in following them up and contacting the residents. So I did have some questions about that, but they've already been anticipated and answered, so nothing else from me, Chair.
That's okay. If any come up along the process, just fire away. Okay, Spencer?
I'm grateful. I'll allow you to move on to a larger group, Chair.
That's all right. That's okay. Don't worry. Don't bother. Right. Mary, did you have any questions at all?
Actually, I don't have any questions. I think the team work hard, and we have niggles now and again, but that's nothing unusual. I was just going to say, with regard to Wecock Farm, I hope you've checked that the post offices are not going to close nearby, because Cosham's down to close. But we're doing a petition at the minute, so I've forgotten what the other thing was.
It'll come back to you. And so for housing colleagues, the council is united in opposing the closures of Cosham and also Slindon Street post offices as well. I know that the local MP in Cosham has been incredibly active to try and stop that. We hope she's successful. So, yeah. Weacock Farm Post Office then.
Yeah, so as far as we're aware, they aren't scheduled for closure, but in addition to the post office payments, we're also in the process of giving our tenants the ability to use pay points, you know, so that where you can get pay point in convenience stores and so on, and they are even closer than the post offices. So in the short term it's post offices, but eventually they'll be able to pay any pay point as well.
Yeah. Thank you. That is a good idea, because there's two just... I used to work on Weacock Farm, so I know it very well.
That's great, Mary. Thank you very much for that. And finally, for this point, Ray.
More of a point just to actually emphasise the fact that the increase is not going to cover our costs, just in case it was missed in your presentation. So basically, I just want to emphasise that part of it. And reference Weacock, the housing office that we've got there at the moment, is that going to stay as a housing office, or will it be used as another?
Yeah, sorry, I did omit to explain that. We are actually looking to redevelop that building, and it will eventually, it's got to go through planning and so on, but it will be repurposed into 4 flats.
Okay. Does that answer your questions, Ray? Thank you very much. Now, our resident consortium colleagues, who are even more important than the rest of us. Right, who wants to go first? Who did this in rehearsals then? Oh, it looks like it's young Mary. Thank you very much indeed.
Looks like it's going to be young Mary. Right, I've got no real qualms with any of the payments that need to go out. The only thing a lot of people were concerned about were the charges, the service charges, and what they're getting for the service. Now, as a group, the consortium went out to Mountjoy and to Conserve and went round all their offices, spoke to a lot of their people, and all of a sudden, they're so much friendlier. Because now, when you speak to them on the phone, they know it's you. And when you speak to them on the phone, you know, you can't lose your temper because you know them. So it gets embarrassing. So I think our service has gone up. So therefore, the service is fairly fair as well. And the older people around the area, older than me, I have been into John Pound Centre with various groups, having a chat about using their phones, how to pay by direct debit, or if they want to, just transfer money. And cross fingers, some of them listened. In fact, I know some of them listened quite a lot. But apart from that, we're fine, thank you.
Thank you for that, Mary. The idea of people at Portsea walking into the John Pound Centre always scares me rigid. But anyway, that's a different story entirely. Mandy.
Yeah, there was only the one thing which I think a few people have mentioned, is that where I am, which is sort of middle of Paulsgrove, to be fair, we don't actually see a lot being done as regards of, you know, I mean, we're paying for services, for cleaning, for, you know, etc. And people are really feeling like they've been let down. And even I was a little bit surprised to see that if you are in a house, your charges are going down, whereas in the flats, they are going up by 2.7%. And I was just wondering how that was worked out. It doesn't seem, I'm not saying we should all be the same, because obviously they don't require the same amount of input as, you know, like myself in a flat would from the services, but I still didn't see how theirs went down. I would have understood it maybe if they'd stayed the same as they were last year, but why have they gone down when obviously everything that they do costs more these days anyway?
Thank you for that, Mandy. Alan, can you answer this? Because it is something that did come through in the consultation quite a lot, particularly around service charges.
Yes, if I could answer the particular point about the lower service charge. That is good news in that we've managed to obtain compensation from the general fund to recognise the users of the play and youth service that are not council tenants. So it's recognising that reduction is actually in both charges. So the higher charge would have been higher than it is at the moment if we hadn't managed to get that compensation agreed. Unfortunately, the higher charge, the main driver of cost is the staff. And we talked in my presentation around the increases both in pay awards but also in national employer national insurance contributions following the budget, which is driving our employment costs up. And because we have a policy of cost recovery, there's no real alternative but to pass that on to the users of the service.
Okay, Mandy, does that answer your point? And you can say no, don't worry.
Yes, fairly. No, I can see how it would make some sense. But yeah, it still doesn't sound right to me, to be honest.
Oh, Sally, okay.
Okay, so I think happy to talk you through that in more detail, Mandy. We can definitely do that. But I think the key difference is in houses, there are less staff involved in delivering the services. And as Alan's just said, that's where the increases are coming from. So, you know, in a block, you've got cleaners, you've got grounds maintenance people, you've got, you know, that kind of staffing level. In a house, they've got no communal spaces, so they've not got the cleaning or the grounds maintenance. So that's one of the key differences. But just to come back to your point around people feeling let down, they're not getting the service. If people have got a concern about the standard of cleaning or grounds maintenance that they're getting, we do really want them to let us know that, yeah? And so they can call the estate services team and pull on them at any point, or if they've just got general feedback, they can go into that team and give them feedback. But the other thing is, if there are a number of people in that area, then what we might need to do is arrange an estate walkabout, and then we can all pick that up together and figure out what we need to do to get it to where it needs to be. Okay?
Can I just say that I can recommend the walk around. It's a really good idea. We did it in Caution. It's really good.
Yeah. We've done one, I think, so far in Paulsgrove, a walkabout. But it is definitely something that from that one highlighted quite a lot, so I'd be very keen to have another one set up that we could and I think concentrate, if I believe rightly last time it was mainly on the houses, the top part, but if we could do more the bottom or right up the very top, Hillsley Road type area where it is mainly flats, I think that would also help and maybe encourage people to talk to us about, you know, what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. What I'll do is I'll put Phil in touch with you so that you can arrange and you can let him know the areas that you want to focus on.
And then also I think I was just saying to say one sentence and then you can come back, Mary. And also please let us know the outcome, because we want to try and make sure we improve the service in all ways possible. So sorry, that was my interruption, Mary. I shouldn't interrupt you, Ma'am. Far away.
I was interrupting you. I do beg your pardon. But I will have to say also, safe and clean is something we've had a major problem with, not just ourselves, the whole area. It's all coming together now. Not perfect just yet, but they are actually starting to get things right, because we had a problem with bins and rubbish and fly tipping. But I think they're getting on top of it. It seems to be so much better. So that's all that's come from is just talking to them and telling them and walking around with them and showing them things. And my phone with all the pictures, of course.
It's a shock, isn't it? Telling people the truth and actually having an open dialogue actually works.
Yeah.
It's a shock, I know.
Just a little chat and they help.
Well, that's incredibly helpful, Mary. We have had a report on the stuff around the bins in Portsea previously that has reflected exactly what you've just outlined, which is that there were initial problems, partly because of the changes that occurred, and it got better. because people actually learnt as they went along. It's a deep shock for the public sector, I know. But I'm very grateful to you. I've got one question that actually follows on, Alan, from what Mandy was saying, because I thought the government was compensating councils for any staff that are affected by the changes to employer national insurance. I mean, I've seen figures of 515 million quid, 4 billion or whatever, emerging out of Her Majesty's Treasury. Does that apply to the HRA as of now?
As of now, the answer is no. If I could elaborate slightly.
Elaborate slightly. Yes.
So you're correct. The government, when they announced the increase in employer national insurance contributions, both the rate and the bandings at which contributions apply, they did set aside £515 million nationally to compensate local government. We, as yet, do not know how much Portsmouth will get from that pot, but we do know the methodology that they are using to allocate it looks at general fund or council tax services only, and at the total cost of service rather than the wage bill. So it's never going to be a pound for pound compensation. And at the moment, because the indication is they're using it to fund general fund services, then our only interpretation of that will be that none of it will come forth to help the HRA with its deficit and reduce its service charges, which is obviously unfortunate from someone who has to balance the books.
Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, hang on. Oh, no, hang on. He's under starters orders now.
If I might, Chad, also
You do what you like.
unfortunate for the residents that have got to pay the increased costs.
I may return to that in a bit, Spencer. But no, thank you very much. Mr. Denford, thank you very much for your honesty. I have a feeling my pen is coming out again, and my letter writing skills may be required again. So thank you very much for all those questions and comments. Do anybody have any? I mean, you've done what I didn't want, which is actually sort of do comments on the service as well alongside everything. But if colleagues have any comments on the budget as well, or anything they haven't said, then that would be lovely. And I will start with our two residents consortium colleagues. If you've got nothing else to say, don't worry. Oh, blimey, silence. We don't get this to council meetings often, I tell you.
No, there's no further questions.
Yeah, is that all right? Are you okay with both, yeah?
And nothing from me else.
Well, that's all right.
So that's two of us.
Well, you mentioned John Pounds earlier. I long for the day for PAG to actually get back in there.
John Pounds are lovely.
They're
Beautiful.
lovely. Second the Portsea Action Group, get back in there, the better. As far as I can see, as well. So thank you, Richard. So I will now do this again in size of council group, which means I will start with the official opposition, which is Spencer goes last. I knew there was a benefit to this, which is the Portsmouth Independent Party. Raymundo.
No, all my questions have been asked and answered already.
Blimey, this is different to council meetings, I tell you. Young Mary.
All good, thank you.
From our Labour colleagues. I mean, that means I told you there was a benefit for this, Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. No questions other than just to thank the officers in putting the report together, reporting to this meeting, and the consortium as well for coming along and giving their views. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much indeed, Spencer. And also thank you to all of you for all that. I want to start with some of my own observations about the service, if that's okay. I mean, what I see is broadly good. And I think some of the comments from the residents' consortium are actually things that I pick up as well. The vast majority of repairs are done first time. Our tenant satisfaction measures for this are way better than housing associations. And I want to thank Councillor Corkery and everyone on the Housing Scrutiny Panel for their independent report, which vindicated that as well. Now, we know there are people who aren't happy. It's just going to happen. That's inevitable. We have to improve. We have to make sure that we can make everybody's lives good. But overall, the position I feel is good. Our engagement with our tenants, I believe, is excellent. Young Mandy over there is Tenant of the Year, which is absolutely sensational for women in housing, which is even better. And I think as the token bloke at your Women in Housing ceremony, I know how popular that was. We've got, as was indicated earlier on, we've got a play and youth service that's improving the lives of so many of our children. It needs to be better, but we know it's there. We also fund wardens that keep our tenants safe. I know many other councils will give their eye teeth for that. But I also know we need to improve. In particular, we need to know more about our stock. And that way we'll know how much the costs of depreciation, the costs of buildings getting older that threatens our budget in years to come will actually be. I know the team's got a plan for that, but for me, that's the foundation on which we can build, and that's one of the things I want to look at alongside the changes to the law. And so to the budget. Firstly, if much of it looks like last year for connoisseurs who were here last year, that's because it is. Our government says capping private sector rents discourages developers from building new homes, just like the Tories. Yet they think it's good to cap council rent rises, just like the Tories, presumably so we can build new homes. But the reality is that that means that we're yet again far short of the cash we need to provide the services people want, let alone the new homes people need. We're in a much better position than many other places. My old authority of Lambeth is asking for a 40 million quid cheque from government because it's only £1 billion short of what it needs to do. We are thankfully not in that position. If anybody wants to buy me a drink later, I can explain why. But that will mean change, I have to say. Yet key bits are different, and I want to come back to what Alan and Mandy were outlining earlier, because for me, it felt that under the Tories, councils had their hands tied behind their back. But now, unfortunately, this government has added weights to our feet and hope we float. £700,000 of weights to be exact, and that's thanks to its view that tenants' rents should pay for its rise in employer national insurance. We deserve the same compensation as the rest. Tenants deserve the same compensation for our staff as the rest of the council. We've debated previously how this rise in other meetings impacts on charities. It's a shame that what applies to social care, to environmental staff, doesn't apply to tenants. My God, you're the first person who ever walked out on me. Normally they do that before I start council meetings, I have to say. We will see you later. Hope you enjoy your bookie. I'm sorry to be blunt about this, but frankly, this means fewer repairs for our tenants. I would say sorry if we were doing this, but we're not, so I won't. So that's why, against this rather unhealthy backdrop, I have no choice but to increase rents by the maximum available. I know it's difficult for many people, but I also note the rises in pensions and the minimum wage are above this, cushioning the blow for many. I also agree, again, to cap rents at housing benefit levels, even though sadly this government, unlike its Tory predecessors, froze it. This is a moral choice for me and my party, and it's one we like to stick to, even when governments of various flavours choose not to. And so I come to service charges. Now, they're not where I want them, and I note the comments in the consultation. I have asked the team for ideas to curb their rise. Unlike other councils, some of which I may have mentioned earlier, we do not put forward savings unless they can be realistically delivered. At present, they can't be. But I will keep on asking and insist on greater transparency for these charges, even if they can't be curbed. Half the time, people just want to know where the money's going on, as Mandy has rightly outlined earlier. But where we do have more control, I'm delighted we remain on the side of residents. I'm delighted, particularly with the cuts in communal heating charges, and I want to thank Councillor Corkery and the Lib Dem St Thomas councillors for their opposition to the rises a few years ago. That set in train events that have led to the cuts today, so for that, many thanks. Now, I've read some interesting comments by our MPs on housing these past few weeks. I see they want more homes built in our city, that's lovely. But I want to know if they're as ambitious and serious about it as I am. If they are, then I expect them to have done the following by the end of the month. I'm generous. First, back tip in the West. We're in the crazy situation where one bit of the government is not giving another bit of the government the information required to get this moving. If the government is serious about building new homes, and the pronouncement today from MHCLG saying that building homes will have priority over the environment going forwards by all the environmental rules, such as what is going on now will be overridden in future, that suggests they are. There must be action, not the delay and dither we saw from the last government. Second, change the rules so that we can properly access the affordable housing programme. Labour has rightly put £500 million more money in it, and that's great, that's wonderful, but only schemes that are built, not approved, not started, built by April 2026, that's 15 months and 2 weeks away, friends, can qualify. Now, that means plans like those for the former Leamington and Horatia houses, that's more than 300 new council homes, friends, are excluded. And we know that civil servants historically have been panicking because the cash hasn't been spent. Change the rules, and that might change, and provide us with the homes that we need. Third, increase housing benefit, particularly the local housing allowance. Copying the Tory freezes make new council homes less viable because there's less rent coming in. And that means they're less likely to be built because building costs are going up. So I would suggest to our Labour colleagues and MPs to be Keynesians and not Thatcherites, and give councils the tools to build homes people can afford. Now, I feel these are simple and not political measures that can be done fast if the will is there. Our MPs want us rightly to be ambitious, so please give us the tools to do it. And if they want to help, my door and my diary is as open as it can be. Because we don't know what the future holds. Sometimes it seems to change from hour to hour. But to the staff who work for our residents, and most importantly the people who live in our homes, we want to carry on doing right by you, regardless of what madness others may have in their fantasies. And so thank you very much, colleagues, for your constructive comments. It's very, very helpful. And to Ray and to Spencer and to Mary, if there's anything that comes up from your casework, anything that you want to raise, please raise with the team. If you feel the team is not helping you, please raise it with me, or raise it with me anyway, because we all want to try and work together, because we all came into this thing because we wanted to make people's lives better. Today, as I was coming in, I'm sorry I was late for coming in, but I was told by someone that someone who'd been sleeping rough in Commercial Road had found a place. And that was down to them, and that was down to the team. We can change people's lives, and hopefully we'll all work together to do that a bit more often. And so with this, I approve this budget. And on that basis, you'll be delighted to know, because we can all go home early, that the meeting closes, Alison, at 4:42 and 30 seconds. I don't think 30 seconds is going to get on the thing. But thank you very much, all colleagues. I look forward to seeing you soon. Cheers.